started. Melanie, thank you so much for being here.
It is my pleasure. I'm excited to chat with you and my fellow homeschoolers in Alaska today. I wanted to take a minute to introduce myself in case I am new to you. I am a clinical psychologist by training. I wasn't planning to be a homeschooling mom. I just kept feeling this strong calling, and then I did some research on it, and I found myself agreeing that it was a superior form of education and it was a lifestyle that I wanted for my family. But I was a writer and a speaker, and that is what I wanted to do more than doing counseling. And I just didn't see how that was going to work out. But now the joke is on me because that's what I write and speak about is homeschooling. And I have been homeschooling for more than 20 years. I have 6 children that I have homeschooled. 2, I am still homeschooling. They are in high school. And 6 years ago or 5 years ago? A little over 5 years ago now, I published a language arts curriculum called Grammar Galaxy that I'm going to tell you more about today. But first, I want to talk to you about why I created this language arts curriculum. I certainly didn't start off planning on creating it. But the reason that I did is that as someone who is a passionate reader and someone who loves writing, I did professional writing as a freelancer, and I did all kinds of speaking as well. I just thought that my kids would adore language arts like I did, but instead I had kids who would beg me not to teach English. I actually had one of my sons offer me money not to teach it to him. And I thought, what in the world? I tried all kinds of different curricula, and there were certainly aspects of the curriculum that I found that I thought were really, really smart. They were very helpful and better in many respects than how I was taught things in school, language arts in school. But I kind of got on a mission to figure out, why do my kids hate this so much? And I picked up the curriculum that we were using, and I had it for multiple grade levels, and I started realizing that half of the curriculum was repeat year after year after year. And I started thinking about it this way, with this analogy, that it's a little bit like when you are flying and the flight attendant is giving you the safety information, and you've heard it and you've heard it and you've heard it and you've heard it. But if you were ever to be in an emergency, you'd be like, now wait, what? What am I supposed to do here? I know I would be. I'd be panicking. I don't remember what they said, even though I've heard it, 100 times. And I realized that that is how my kids were reacting to English and grammar, that they were just so sick of it. The same thing every single year. And in fact, the same material is taught from first grade all the way through 12th grade, which is just kind of mind blowing. And so kids just check out because they know you're going to teach it again the next year. And then I kind of started thinking about teaching my own, or not teaching, but creating my own curriculum. But there was still something missing, because if I would have gone with the original concept that I had, I don't think anyone would have purchased it. But one day I was driving home from a family vacation when all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, why don't we teach language arts and grammar in particular in the context of story? Because story is the very best part of language arts. Instead of doing that, though, what we do is we give kids these disconnected sentences and we say, find all the nouns in these, but these sentences are meaningless. They're boring. They make no sense because they're disconnected from one another. They're disconnected from what our kids are doing in their lives. And I thought, what if I created a fictional place called Grammar Galaxy, where there was an enemy of the galaxy called the Gremlin, whose goal it was to destroy the English language. And there was a royal English family whose job it was to protect the galaxy and protect the English language. But the king would make his children, his 3 children, the guardians of the galaxy. And then what if the chaos that would occur because of what the Gremlin did was so involved and so extensive that his kids couldn't handle it themselves, and they would have to enlist their friends to be guardians of the galaxy as well. And so I started thinking about, how could these stories not just, be entertaining stories about what happens in Grammar Galaxy, but the simple fact of the chaos that the Gremlin caused would teach kids the why of language arts. So let me give you an example of one of the stories. In one of the stories in Nebula, that's the volume 1, and I'm going to show you, I will give you some peeks at it in a bit. But in one of the stories, the Gremlin convinces the pronouns that they are professional nouns and that they should pretty much refuse to do any work until they are treated with the respect and honor that they deserve. And so the pronouns become unavailable to the people living on planet English. Imagine what it would be like to speak without using any pronouns. And so that is what happens in the story. The English family is trying to play apples to apples without using pronouns, and it becomes a disaster. So I realized that by telling those kinds of stories, kids would understand the why, and not just, well, you just have to do it this way because I say so, because that's how we've always done it. And I could give kids a memory hook. So another example, I could say to probably most adults in our country today, what's a prefix? And they would give me a blank look, most likely. I know my husband did. I don't know. He doesn't know. But in Grammar Galaxy, prefix is an evil computer programmer who introduces a virus, or actually 2 viruses, he ends up introducing into the galaxy's computer system. The first one is the revirus, and everything begins repeating. People repeat themselves, and videos rewind and rewind and rewind. And unbeknownst to the English family, the evil programmer prefix suggests that he could solve the problem by introducing another virus into the system called the unvirus. And so that doesn't work. And instead, everything begins to become undone, for example. And there are all different kinds of things that happen because of the prefix un and the prefix re. And so now kids are going to remember what a prefix is, and they're also going to remember what some prefixes, common prefixes, mean. And so this was the beginnings of helping kids learn to enjoy all things English. And I didn't just create the curriculum around grammar, although many people think that's all that it teaches because it's called Grammar Galaxy. I teach all the language arts in this curriculum. So I teach literary concepts. One of my favorite stories in the first volume is when the Gremlin has all literature, both fiction and nonfiction, labeled as nonfiction in the galaxy's computer system, library computer catalog, I should say, library catalog. And so all of the nonfiction stories start coming to life. And at first, one of the Royal English kids thinks that is so cool, but they quickly figure out that that's actually not going to be cool because there are all kinds of monsters that could come to life for real. And so then the guardians of the galaxy need to go in and assign these fictional books the fiction label. And so that's how I teach kids the difference between fiction and nonfiction, as an example. So the next step for me was I didn't want kids to be sitting there doing boring workbooks. Just that word workbook is a turnoff to most kids. I do know some kids love them, but most kids do not. And so I thought, what if I didn't call it a workbook, but I called it a mission manual? And each lesson where they would practice what they learned in the story would be a mission. So that is what I did. Each mission begins with a letter from the Royal English Children, reminding them what happened in the story and why they really need them to help complete this mission. Sometimes they're given a repeat of the information from the story that they need to complete that mission. And I have broken each mission up into 3 different steps that take just 10 to 15 minutes a piece, depending on the level. But in the early volumes, that's all that it takes. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can change my video settings here so that I'm not mirrored. Okay, so let's see. I'm not mirrored now, so you should be able to see this without it looking strange. Yes. Okay. So there you go. So that's the story. That's where it starts. And so people will ask me, well, so does my child read the story? These stories are written at a high 3rd grade level, a strong 3rd grade level. So if your student is reading at that level, then these stories could be read independently. If your student is at a 1st or a 2nd grade reading level, so you're an advanced 1st grader, for example, because that's what you have to be in order to start this program, then you would be reading the story. The stories are about 10 minutes long, but I do have the first 3 volumes so far in professionally produced audiobooks. So you could also play that audio and have your child listen to the story. It's funny, the things that happen. There's a lot of miscommunication about what's happening. And there's also a bit of mystery, as I don't label, you can see I don't label what the chapter is about. So that gives your student the chance to try to guess what is going wrong here. What is the gremlin up to? I had a classroom teacher tell me that her students just love that aspect of it, and they're trying to guess what the problem really is in the story. So at the end of the story, oh, let me say this first though. You're going to see this text box with the stars around it. What I really don't like as a homeschooling mom is when I come to a new word, if I'm not sure of the exact meaning of it, I don't want to stop, open up my dictionary, look it up, then say the word, and then try to get back into the story. And so I wanted to make it really easy for moms and students to provide high level vocabulary. I've had parents say to me, these are not 2nd grade words. And I say, right. Some of these words are SAT, ACT level words. And that is intentional because of the research I've done that shows that the best predictor of your child's academic and life and even relationship success is best predicted by your child's vocabulary. The only way we are going to grow our kids' vocabulary is by exposing them to words that are above what they're using and hearing on in shows and music and that kind of thing. And you won't be surprised to learn that that vocabulary is at a very, very low level. It's not going to challenge them. Even newspapers today don't challenge vocabulary very much. They're not introducing high level vocabulary. We kind of dumb down our vocabulary, which is really, really not what we want to do. So I provide you not with a full definition, and that kind of confuses people. Sometimes they're like, oh, but that's not the meaning of that word. And it is the meaning of the word. It's a synonym of the word in that context. It's not the only meaning of that word. If I were to provide you with every meaning for that word, it would take over the book. So that's what I do. Like this one is, Luke says in obvious distress. And so distress is upset. And then later he says, you're talking gibberish, and gibberish is defined as nonsense. Okay. So you can choose. That's the other thing people will ask me. Well, how do I say those vocabulary words? You can define them before you read the story if you prefer. You can stop when you get to a good stopping point and say, oh, distress means upset, and just make it natural. The audiobook does not define the vocabulary words. because it would be disruptive to do that. Okay, so when you get to the end of the story, this is very, very important to me, because when you're reading something out loud, or even if you have a child reading it independently, you want to make sure that we're checking for reading comprehension. And so I have some reading comprehension questions for you to ask your student to make sure that they're getting what is happening in the story. I always ask about a vocabulary word. So if your student doesn't remember, then you can go back and find the definition. I always ask about the topic that is being taught. So this one is, what is a syllable? Because I teach spelling strategies, not spelling word lists in that particular lesson. And then there's more of a find out if your child understands what is happening in the story that isn't being spelled out. So let's see what this one is. Yeah, so this is more of a guessing what the Kirk wasn't able to say something in the story. And so you're asking the student, what do you think he was trying to say? But sometimes I am asking the student to talk about, well, what do you think the motivation was there? Why do you think this character was upset? And so we're really helping our students to have higher level critical thinking about what is being read. Okay, so you read that 10-minute story, or your child reads it. You can read it to multiple students. Many, many families do that. But then each student would have a mission manual, and that is that workbook, like I mentioned before. So like I said, the first thing is a letter from the Royal English Children. And that letter will go over what happened in the story. And like it says, thanks in advance for your hard work. So it's encouraging them to do their work. Every mission includes review. So what makes this different? There are many things that make Grammar Galaxy different. I don't teach what a noun is every year in every volume. I don't. I only teach the basics of a noun in volume 1. And so I want to be continually reviewing from mission to mission. And so that's what these simple questions are at the beginning of each mission. So they're going to go over that. I'm asking them to use these vocabulary words in a sentence. So this word here is somber, which means gloomy. So you as the parent might say, oh, I was in a really somber mood because of the rainy weather. And then you ask your student to use it in a sentence also. Okay. This is one of the things that I love. Well, there are several things that I love, but you're going to see how much white space there is in this mission manual. That is deliberate, because I find that reluctant students, when they see a page that's just single spaced, 25 exercises to do with a grammar concept, there's just a shutdown, especially if you have a student who has some learning challenges. Maybe there's dyslexia, maybe there are some processing disorders, or especially if you have a child with dysgraphia, if there are all kinds of writing exercises, the child will often just quit before they even start. And I want students to look at this and say, I can do this. It takes just 10 to 15 minutes each for each step. You can do those steps, those 3 steps, 3 days a week, or you could do the entire mission, which would take you about 45 minutes-ish. You could do that once a week for 36 missions that will take you through an entire year. Step 2 always includes an activity. I was originally going to create all these like board games and things that you have to laminate. And I thought, why? I hate doing that as a teacher. I hate it so much. I always forget to do it until the last minute. And then I'm like, oh. So I don't do that in Grammar Galaxy. So this one is a low to no prep activity that's not seat work for you and your student. So this one is, try not to use any contractions for the next 30 minutes. How many times do you slip and use them? Have your teacher keep track. Okay. Just simple little things that you can do. Sometimes there are games, there are things that I have you print out, but it's never involved and time consuming. The very end of the mission has an advanced guardian section, and that is for students typically who are ready to do more writing. If your student is just still writing so slowly and laboriously that your child is just going to hate it, then I recommend that you either skip the advanced guardian mission or have your student dictate to you. Or you could just, well, I did say you could skip it, but many times students want to feel like, oh, I'm an advanced guardian, I can do that. And it says right in the instructions, dictate. So I am giving kids who have some learning struggles permission to be who they are and at the level where they are. And that is because I helped teach my friends' kids who had a variety of learning difficulties and challenges. And I wanted them to feel just good about themselves. One of the Royal English children has dyslexia and ADD, but I don't come out and say it, but kids can still pick it up. And all of the children are flawed. They lie and they get caught and they do things that are unwise. And I do that to help kids work on their character and also feel like they're normal and they're doing a great job and improving. At the end of each mission, I have the solutions along with an update from the English children telling them this is how everything worked out because you completed your mission. At the end of each unit, there are 4 to 5 units. 5 is only in the first volume, but at the end of each of those units is a 10-question quiz that they get 2 chances to pass in order to move on to the next unit. And I say right in the unit solutions, if I tell them review after the first one if they can't get 9 out of 10 correct. I say, if you're still struggling, then your teacher can create a challenge for you to pass in order to move on. I want kids to feel successful. And before I show you kind of like the website and what it looks like and what to order and that kind of thing, I just want to share what my philosophy is. You don't have to agree with it, but I think it's really important that you know what my philosophy is in considering a curriculum like Grammar Galaxy. And that is, surprisingly enough, I don't believe that first graders have to know grammar. I don't think they have to know it. And so you might say, well, why did you create a grammar curriculum then? Why did you do that? And there's a writing unit as well. But the reason I did is because I'm a homeschooling mom. I know how anxious I was about my kids being good writers and knowing good grammar. And I know that parents are going to teach grammar and writing and good English to their children. So in that case, I think the most important thing for us to do is to give our kids an experience where they can feel successful and that they have a positive association with grammar and writing in particular, reading too. But because if they don't, by the time their brains develop, I found that with my kids and my friends' kids, regardless of their ability, they just didn't seem to click with grammar and be able to use it effectively in their writing until they were in high school. So everything that I was doing up until that point, and I'm not saying that we don't give our kids writing instruction or even grammar instruction at all, but it better be a positive association. Otherwise, we get these kids who say, I can't do grammar. I have adults tell me that all the time. I can't do it. And that's just not true. It's just that they've had a bad experience, a bad association where it's, grammar is an abstract concept. it's not concrete where it's like something that you can see. And so it's understandable why we don't really get it, most of us, until we're in those high school years. It's just like algebra in that respect, which is also abstract. So we want to keep our kids feeling good about themselves and their abilities until they're developmentally ready to put this into practice. Okay, so I wanted to show you my website, because sometimes people have questions about it and what it means and all of that. So this is the Fun to Learn Books website, and here is Grammar Galaxy. You can go right here if you would like to, but you can also take a quiz here to see if this is a good fit for your student. If you know which level you want, then you can go right to each of these levels to order those particular levels. However, many people don't know which level to start with. So what we want to do is, let me see here. Oh, there we go. Okay. So there is a placement quiz that your student can take. What I think is even better than that, though, is this scope and lesson sequence. So this will show you the topics that are covered in each level. So you have your literature concepts, you have vocabulary concepts, spelling concepts, grammar concepts, and your writing and public speaking concepts. And so what I tell people is, let's say you have a third grader. Then what I would recommend is go to the grammar for third grade and see if you think that your student hasn't covered most of this. If your student hasn't covered most of this, make sure that the level before that has material that has been covered pretty thoroughly. Because remember, I don't teach it thoroughly again in later volumes. What I do is I build on it. So volume 1, which is called Nebula, is going to teach your major parts of speech, so that in volume 2, Protostar, then students are going to pick out the parts of speech, all of them. I will review them briefly, but I'm not going to teach them completely like I did in volume 1. So I hope that that makes sense. Let's go back here. Okay. So this will say, where do you start? You can, once you feel like, okay, I would like to buy Nebula, you can click on Nebula, and that's going to open up the shop with all of the Nebula products. So I just want to point out something that gets commonly confused. Yeah, this is showing up because it's me on the website. You're not going to see that. That created some confusion too. The teacher's guide, there is no teacher's guide for Grammar Galaxy unless you are actually going to teach a class, not just your own kids, but an actual class. Okay. So if your child is in a class with an outside teacher and the teacher says, yes, get this classroom mission manual, then you would get that. Otherwise, for you as a homeschooler, this is what you're going to choose for whatever level. You need 2 books, the text or storybook that we looked at, and you need the workbook or mission manual. That is available to you in 2 different options. You can order it as a digital, and that gives you permission to use the materials, both books, on a tablet or to print out for as many copies as you need for your family. You may not share it with anyone else, another family, but your own family, you can make as many copies as you would like. However, before you choose that option, know that this mission manual is 350 pages plus. So that's a lot of copying. It's a lot more economical for you to purchase it in print from me. The shipping is free, and I do ship, well, I was gonna say I ship internationally, but I'm talking to you in Alaska. So the shipping is free to you, and it's priority. And you can also mix. So let's say you want the print book, but you want a digital mission manual so you can make copies. You can do that as well. And really the best way to do that is you can go to the shop, and I don't know why I have, it's, again, I think it's because I'm looking at this as me rather than how you would see it. But if you go to the shop, then you can search for individual books, or you can also click on those planets also. So you could just click on the mission manual. So if I type in Nebula mission, let's see if that pops up. You can order that individually. And then people will say, well, what do I have to have? Okay, so here's the individual mission manual, and then you'll be able to order that in either digital or print, depending on what you want. Okay. So people will say, well, what is that, everything that I need? And it is everything that you need. The text and the mission manual that you can buy as a kit that I showed you before. But if you want to do more review of the vocabulary words, review of the concepts, then you can order flashcards. I have flashcards for, I believe, the first 4 levels, and those flashcards can be printed. They can also be put as a, like a slide show that you can use on your computer for review. And then I also have the professionally produced audiobook, if you want that. Many students who have some learning or reading challenges, I should say, love having the text in front of them while that professional audio is playing, and that really helps them with their reading fluency. Okay, I am going to stop sharing, and I would love to know if you have any questions that I can answer for you.
Melanie, I was going to ask, originally, one of my big questions while I was looking through was, how tricky is this curriculum to start if you have been using something else and you're really not starting from the beginning? I think you largely addressed that already, using that scope and sequence tool to look through that. So do you have any other thoughts or advice about that? Because I know that's a lot of families are stepping in now to this realm of homeschool, and it's less a prep and more figure it out as you're diving.
Right, right. That's a great question. That's a great question. So the short answer is you can jump in at any level. And there is a prologue at the beginning of the book that will give your kids a basic understanding of what is going on. And then each chapter, they'll pick it up very, very quickly. It's just going to explain to them, okay, so this is what's happening. This is how it works in Grammar Galaxy. And they will not feel lost because of that. However, so here's the long answer. Many families feel like their children have some gaps, especially in their grammar education. And so they wonder about backing up and using a previous volume. I would say that most students, most older students who start using Grammar Galaxy for the first time do back up. And then what can be done, because Grammar Galaxy takes so little time. It takes so little time because I don't give you prescribed books to read. I let you choose the books to read. I am expecting that you're doing a lot of reading. I'm also expecting that you're doing extra writing aside from what I'm giving you. But it takes so little time as written that you can double or triple up on the missions that you do. And I've had families get caught up super, super fast, especially because their kids love it and they beg to do more. I have so many families who tell me, my child is so mad that we're done doing Grammar Galaxy for the summer, because they love it and they want to keep going. So you can absolutely do that and just up your pace and get your student closer to grade level in a very short period of time.
I love that idea, especially with multiple kids, like being able to
Right.
feel comfortable with backing up and then letting the ones who may be largely doing review at that point accelerate at a faster pace. And also imagining my kids are very, very into story. The description of Grammar Galaxy sounds like something they would love. And I can see my older child being frustrated that he's missing the stories from earlier if he's jumping in ahead. So I could see us wanting to back up just to get all of the stories and build that love of the world
Yes.
that you've created as
Yes.
they're picking up the grammar and moving forward.
And I'm so glad that you said that, because the Facebook group that I have, most of the families, when they're asked advice about where should I start, most of them will say start with Nebula. It, however, is not required. So if your student really, they know nouns, they know adjectives, adverbs, they've really done the vast majority of the stuff that's in Nebula, there is no problem also with starting at a later volume.
Awesome. Thank you. That's exciting.
You're welcome.
I also love coming from a dyslexic perspective myself. I love the multi-sensory option of doing the audiobook and the text at the same time, and having where you're stimulating multiple senses in order to take that information in. That sounds so helpful and such an exciting resource to be able to see that validation as an option within a language arts course, which usually is one where there's a lot of struggle. So I appreciate that.
Right. And I've really, I have, of my 6 children, 5 of them are boys. And I really tried to keep this as, I guess, active as I could. So a lot of the step 2 activities are active, like when I'm teaching kids how to form plurals of certain nouns. If something takes an ES suffix to form a plural rather than an S, I have you either putting a box on the floor or making a box with tape on your floor, and then having your student jump into the box if it takes an ES, because the word box forms a plural with the ES suffix. So it's things like that. And, there are other fun activities that we do. And you can expand on that as much as you would like to. I've just included one activity per mission that I think is, fun, non-seat work kind of thing. But it's really, really important to me to appeal to students' learning styles, and not just the one, where it's reading alone.
Well, I really appreciated the why behind the grammar. That's the idea of looking at this world and seeing, even in a humorous and adventurous way, oh, this does matter, is a really helpful place to start. So I'm excited. Thank you so much for sharing. I don't want to hog, I'm having all of these responses, but I also want to let anyone else share if they have any questions or comments.
Yes. And, one super important thing that I didn't share for whatever reason is that you can try a sample of every volume of Grammar Galaxy, a complete sample. So it's the story and it's the entire mission with all the answers for free if you just go to fundalearnbooks.com/samples. In fact, I'll just type that in, okay? So we can see that, everyone. Okay. And that will take you right to that sample page. And I really hope that you will give it a try, because I don't want unhappy customers. I don't want you to purchase Grammar Galaxy if it's not a good fit for your family. If it's not, there is something else that I'm sure will be a good fit. But this is absolutely the best way to see if it's a good choice for you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and spending time telling us about the creation of your curriculum and how to use it. It was really informative and helpful, and a pleasure, Melanie. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. It was lovely to meet you. And I just wish all of you a wonderful, wonderful school year. I hope that you have fantastic memories. You make wonderful memories with your kids, and that you will keep that as a top priority, not just, the education, the curriculum, the workbooks, because that has been the best part of homeschooling for us as a family, is all the fun memories that we've had.
I think that that is a really helpful heart reminder in the middle of work sample and grade deadline season. So thank you for that.
You are very
All right.
welcome.
Thank you so much.